Welcome to Does It Matter by Brainy Ballers, where we dissect the game with cutting-edge analytics to give you the upper hand. We analyze everything from hand sizes to average depth of targets to uncover hidden trends that no one else sees. Say goodbye to guesswork and hello to data-driven domination. Because here at Brainy Ballers, we don't just watch the game, we understand it. So get ready, it's podcast time.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a question, one that comes up a lot for sports fans, fantasy strategists too. Does a defensive back's height actually predict how well they'll do? Specifically in the NFL, for fantasy points. We've got this really interesting study here, lots of data crunched on top fantasy finishers going back to 2003. And our mission really is to pull out the key insights for you.
That's right. And this wasn't just like a quick look. To really cut through the noise, they tried to find a happy medium. So they analyzed the top 50 fantasy finishers each season. But crucially, they compared the absolute top, the top 10, against guys ranked 41st to 50th.
Okay, so focusing on the extremes.
Exactly. It lets you see if there's a real difference between the very successful and, the guys just making the list, rather than getting bogged down with everyone in the middle.
Right, okay. Let's unpack that. So the first findings, they kind of hinted at something, didn't they?
They did.
Looking at average heights, they found this pretty solid trend. In 16 out of 21 seasons, players in that top 10 group were the same height or actually taller than the guys in the 31st to 50th group.
Yeah, which, immediately suggests there might be a link there. Well, that's what it looked like initially, and it made them want to pinpoint, an exact height. Is there a threshold? Their first chart, this differences chart, it pointed towards maybe 5'10", an eighth, and above. That looked like a potential sweet spot.
Okay, 5'10" and an eighth. And here's where it gets really interesting, right?
Do you want to start dominating your drafts? At BrainyBallers.com, we've researched every metric under the sun for you to find which ones are best linked to fantasy points. You can access hundreds of metrics to sharpen your scouting ability so you know which metrics matter and which are just noise. Stop guessing on which thresholds to look for within each metric. Big numbers can be misleading or irrelevant. Our Ultimate Athlete Blueprints reveal essential scouting metrics, their importance, and benchmarks within each metric that help predict a player's probability of being a success or bust. Elevate your scouting ability with Brainy Ballers' Ultimate Athlete Blueprints today. Click the link in the description. Now back to the show.
They tested that theory. They looked at the bottom 10 guys since 2003, found about 80.5% were at or above that 5'10" and an eighth mark.
Okay.
But then the top 10 finishers, that number jumped to 88.2%. A 7.6% increase.
Yeah.
Seems significant.
It does seem like something, yeah. But it raised a key question. Was that height 5'10" and an eighth, just kind of the average height for all DBs anyway?
Right. Is it special or just normal?
Exactly. So they couldn't just stop there. They refined it. They did more testing and setting the height a little higher, actually, at 5'10" and 3/8 inches and above, a 14.1% higher rate of making the top 10 compared to finishing in the bottom 10. So that refined height, 5'10" and 3/8, that became the new focus. Seemed like a stronger signal.
Okay, so they drilled down, found this seemingly optimal height range. But what does it all mean for you? This is kind of the crucial part of the deep dive, isn't it?
It really is, because finding patterns is one thing, but proving they're statistically predictive, that's another.
Right. So they applied standard stats methods, and this is key. This is the real deep dive part, right?
Absolutely, because finding a pattern is one thing, knowing if it's statistically meaningful is another. They ran the standard statistical tests, and this is really crucial. The Pearson value for defensive back height predicting fantasy points was 0.072.
0.072. Now, for people maybe not deep into stats, now basically that number tells you how strongly two things are linked. You usually want to see something like 0.1 or higher, especially in sports science, to say there's a meaningful connection.
They even mentioned in the study that the slight trend they saw with height seems to be diminishing a tiny bit over the last couple of decades anyway.
Interesting. So the big takeaway seems to be, while taller DBs, specifically those maybe 5'10" and 3/8 or taller, do appear more often in that top 10 fantasy group. You can't really rely on height alone to predict who's going to be a top fantasy scorer next season. The stats just don't back it up strongly enough.
That's the core finding. It highlights that context is everything. You see a trend, but you test it rigorously. And here, the data advises against using height as a primary filter when you're scouting DBs for fantasy.
Right. It's maybe a small piece of information, but definitely not the whole picture.
Exactly. It's an observation, maybe a tiebreaker in some rare cases, but not a cornerstone of your evaluation.
Makes total sense. So it really makes you think then, what other things, maybe in sports or just anywhere, seem like they should matter based on observation, but when you really dig into the numbers, the statistical links just isn't that strong. Something to chew on.